Hello you plonkers and welcome back today to another video on the Drewzy channel. The season is donezo completo. Geelong win the grand final as I predicted in my finals prediction. So for all those people hating on me for getting everything else in the finals wrong, it doesn't matter because I got the grand finalist right, the grand final winner right, and very well deserving Geelong, a very great football club. But we're not here to just talk about Geelong, we're here to talk about every single team. Today I'm going to be giving each AFL team a grade on their 2022 AFL season. Make sure you like the video if you've enjoyed my content this season and subscribe if you are new to the channel. Before we get into the video, I just want to say that this video is brought to you by Manscaped, and before you skip ahead and get on with the rest of the things in this video, just have a moment to respect the boys at Manscaped for helping your boy Drewzy out all season long, allowing me to do what I love doing and make a little bit of coin on the side. They've released a new package called the Platinum Package, which contains everything you need in the bathroom. The Platinum Package contains a 2-in-1 shampoo, a deodorant, a cologne, the Lawnmower 4.0, the nose and ear hair weed whacker, as well as liquid formulations. It's got absolutely everything you need. They chuck in a travel bag and also a pair of boxes if you go using the link in the description right now. I use Drewzy20 at checkout, all caps, no spaces, at manscaped.com. Everything you need, all in one bundle. So thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring today's video and sponsoring me all season. Anyhow, let's get on with these grades. So we've got A for awesome, B for bloody good, C for content, D for disappointing, E for extremely bad, and F for failure. There's also going to be a plus and a minus. So if you got, let's say, a C plus, you're content with some positives, and if you get a C minus, you're content, but there's some negatives. So that's how we're going to roll with it. And for this video, I've got no notes, just completely going off the cuff. So we're going to start off in alphabetical order with Adelaide, and I think Adelaide are pretty content. I'm going to say Adelaide are a C for the 2022 AFL season. The Crows climbed from 15th up to 14th, so they're steadily improving, and they're just a rebuilding side. We know this, but I think it's coming along quite well. They had some games this year where they showed some brilliant footy, in particular off the dome, the Carlton game, which was probably their biggest win of the season, and of course that showdown where Dawson kicked the goal after the siren. But they're starting to build the quality on the list. Dawson again was a great addition, but guys like Sam Berry coming through, Darcy Fogarty maturing as a player, plenty of others that I don't really care to mention right now. I reckon as a Crows fan, you're pretty content. You're not saying that season was bloody good, and you weren't really disappointed. I think C is fair. For the Brisbane Lions, I'm going to give them a C+. I wouldn't say Brisbane's 2022 season was bloody good because they finished in a lower ladder position than they did last year. Last year they finished in the top 4 but went out in straight sets. But this year they finished outside of the top 4 and won 2 finals. So I think C, like, you're content with the season that you had because you didn't really drop too much. But it's positive because you won 2 games in finals, which you haven't done in a very long time. So I reckon it wasn't bloody good because it wasn't much different from last year. But you have now got winning finals under your belt. You've won at the MCG in big games, although you got belted by Geelong. It may be a bit rough giving them only a C+, but I just think during the home and away season, they weren't that great. Although the plus comes from the finals wins that they got. That's how I am convincing myself that they got a C+. Let's move on to the next team. For Carlton, it's a tricky one, but I'm going to give them a C+. It would have been a B if they had have made finals, but the fact that they started the year 8-2 and managed to miss out on finals means I can't give them a bloody good score because they were pretty much in the 8 for, was it 22 rounds until the last quarter of the last game of round 23, and then they get kicked out of finals. So obviously there's lots of positives, which is why they get the C+. I think Carlton fans overall would be content with the season that they've had because they've seen a lot of progress. The club's in the best spot that it's been in a very long time. We saw Charlie Curnow burst onto the scene, fulfilling his potential this year, and that midfield is just absolutely lethal. If they can keep a healthy list, there's no doubt in my mind next year that they'll be in the top 8 come the last round of the season and play finals. For Collingwood, I'll have to give them an A+. Obviously, they didn't win the flag, but it was just about a perfect season for Collingwood to go from 17th into the top 4 and playing a prelim, only losing by 1 point, 1 point shy of the grand final. No one saw it coming. The list completely bought into Craig McRae's footballing philosophy. Bloody hell, why do I give myself these tongue twisters? But they didn't want to waste any time trying to, understand the new system. They were just like, our time is now. A few years ago, we were in a grand final. We're not going to waste this talent that this list has. I've said it plenty of times, but this list is a great mix of older experience that is still quality as well as young and upcoming talent. Bloody lots of players had a great year at Collingwood. It was an A+ year. Absolutely awesome, positive. The future is bright for the Pies. They could win the flag next year after being 17th. Massive raps for the Pies. But Essendon, I'm going to have to give them a big fat F. Essendon went from the top 8 to the bottom 4. That is a failure, isn't it? They sacked their coach, but I just think Essendon are culturally bit rotten. Not rotten, rotten. All of the late season drama just shows where Essendon are as a club. They're a bit of a shambles. They're run by a lot of old blokes who are probably detached from the current reality that 2022 is. And Essendon fans gave me a lot of stick in my preseason predictions, saying that they wouldn't finish in the top 8. Little did they know that they wouldn't finish in the top 10 or the top 12 or the top 14, but the bottom 4. It was very disappointing, and not only disappointing, it was a complete failure of a season that Essendon fans will want to forget. For Fremantle, I'm going to give them a B+. Boy, has it been a long wait to get back into the top 8 and play finals footy. 2015 was the last time, and I sort of thought we were on the brink of it heading into this year. But when we beat Melbourne and Brisbane in the middle of the year, it just set the blueprint for what the future looks like. Fast, exciting football, solid down back, with plenty of stars all over the park. Very young as well. We're still like the 3rd youngest list in the competition. Won a final, massive comeback to win that. And we made the semis, getting eliminated by Collingwood, obviously, after a slow start in that game. But it was a bloody good year to be a heave-ho fan, let me tell you. A lot better than the previous years, and the future is looking very bright. Lots of positives. Once we get this forward line right and we can start kicking more goals, we should be sweet. If Freo don't have a flag by 2030, I will cut my left pinky toe off. I don't need to talk about the young stars, but you know who they are. It was a bloody good season for the Dockers. For Geelong, I'm going to give them I'm giving them an A+, of course I am. The Premiers, they dominated the grand final just about from start to finish. They won how many games in a row to finish the season? The number 1 offensive and defensive rated side for pretty much the entire second half of the year. The oldest team to ever be fielded in a grand final. They had the piss taken out of them all year for how old their list is and their recruitment strategies over the past few years. But finally, they've got a flag. Jeremy Cameron has a flag. Patrick Dangerfield has a flag. Great addition in Tyson Stengel. Sam De Koning was a rising star down back. Joel Selwood gets another flag in his career, as does Tom Hawkins. You can't hate on greatness. This Geelong side has been so good for so long. They absolutely deserved a flag. If they didn't get a flag with this side, it would have been a massive failure. But they did. So it was absolutely awesome, plus positive, because it was great. They won the flag in it. Next. For Gold Coast, I'm going to give them a C+. I don't think it was a bloody good year for Gold Coast, but you have to be content and positive that it was their highest ever finish, most wins ever in a season, and they look like an actual football side now. Early on in their existence, they would just chalk up the 4 points against the Gold Coast boys, but they're a threat. You go up to Metricon, it's not an easy game like it used to be. They had their highest ever finish without their best key forward in Ben King, of course. Marbia Chol moving up to the Gold Coast was a great acquisition for them. The only real negative this season for Gold Coast was Isaac Rankin requesting a trade, as well as them just trading away a draft pick for a packet of chips because of their salary cap issues or whatever. But overall, I think it was a positive season for Gold Coast and something that they can build on next year. GWS, I have to give an F. They made finals last year, and I still think this year they had the best list in the competition just about. You look at this list, bro, it is crazy how good it is. Other than Jeremy Cameron and maybe like Rory Lobb, not that he's all this and that, but they still have a lot of those key pieces that played in the 2019 grand final against Richmond when they got pumped. How can the quality still be there in terms of personnel, but not translate to on-field performance? Obviously, they've sacked Leon Cameron, their coach, halfway through the season because things weren't going well. But now there's an exodus. Taranto, Hopper, Bobby Hill, all these guys are leaving. The fact that these important players are leaving is very disappointing for the GWS franchise as a whole. I don't think players want to play in Greater Western Sydney in front of 7,000 people when you could be playing at the MCG in front of, 80,000 if you go to Richmond in Hopper and Taranto's case. So, it was a failed season for GWS for sure, and it's going to be pretty interesting to see how they navigate through the next half a decade, given that they've had a premiership window and now they've got a lot of talent leaving. Because if they go back to the draft, it could just be a rinse and repeat. Guys like Tanner Bruin already requesting a trade back to Victoria. So dicey times for GWS. Hawthorn, I'm going to give a C+. I think they hopped up one spot on the ladder from the previous year. First year under Sam Mitchell. They played some great footy early on in the season. Don't forget that they beat Geelong, almost got over Carlton when Carlton were red hot earlier in the season. And they were just competitive for most weeks, the Hawks. Jai Newcomb had a great season, polled very well in the Brownlow for a second-year player. Mitch Lewis just showed every quality that a key forward should have in today's AFL. So I think Hawthorn are content and they're positive about the future of the club, although obviously all the racism allegations and all that didn't finish the year the way that they wanted to. But in terms of on-field performance, I think you're pretty content and positive as a Hawthorn fan. Now, this one could be controversial, but I'm going to give Melbourne a D+. They won their first, 10, 11 games of the season. If you told a Melbourne fan at that point that you're going to go out in straight sets, they would be bloody disappointed. But with a plus, because they can go again for a flag next year. I said in the middle of the year when the May and Melksham bust-up happened, it doesn't take much for a top side to start to slide down a little bit. A little crack started to appear, and ever since then, they were pretty much, 6 and 8, had a losing record in the last half of the year. Their forward craft was pretty dicey all year as well. Once Tom McDonald went out, they couldn't really get that mix right, which they had in 2021 in their premiership year. I think it's disappointing, which is why they're getting a D+, but obviously the positive is they can reset and go again next year to potentially push for another flag. I think they need to get Jacob Van Roy in a few games next year because I think he could be the X factor that they potentially missed. The young man has loads of talent. They're going to get Tom McDonald back in. Probably Brodie Grundy as well. Still flags to be had for this Melbourne side, but the fact that they went out in straight sets after finishing in the top 4, played both home finals at the MCG, losing to 2 interstate sides. I mean, that is disappointing. North Melbourne, F. They were on the bottom last year. They're on the bottom this year. They sacked their coach. The best part was they brought in a new coach, Alistair Clarkson, the best coach of the modern era, other than the racism allegations, which we're not going to talk about. But really, we saw little to no progress from North Melbourne this year. They've got stars in there like Cam Zerha, Luke Davies, Uniacke, Nick Larkey, all these guys that had some real good games this year. Not every week, but, good games. They showed that they still have that star power. So let's hope that Alistair Clarkson can bring it out of them. They're going to have a lot of new personnel there next year. So it's going to be a completely new look for North Melbourne. But the 2022 season was a failure, no doubt about it. Port Adelaide are getting a D. They finished in the top 4 last year, I believe, and this year they didn't even make the top 8. They started the season 0 and 5, and they just didn't look like that same Port Adelaide side as they've been in the last few years. We forget that this Port Adelaide list still has a lot of its talent in the younger end of the spectrum. So it's not like they're going to go into a rebuild or anything like that. You don't have to worry about that. There's probably going to be one last roll of the dice for Ken Hinkley, and then they've got to change something up. But off the top of my head, I can't really remember any real good results for Port Adelaide this year. It was a very disappointing season for the Power. For Richmond, I'm going to give them a C+. I think Richmond fans would have been pretty nervous to slip out of the top 8 last year after the flags that they'd won and think, oh boy, we're going back down to the bottom. But they managed to regather themselves after years and years of late finishes because they bloody played September every year. They were probably just a bit cooked. And then they come back into this year, didn't play finals last year, refreshed, went again, and they finished the season in great form. They lost the game against Brisbane in the finals on a knife edge. It was pretty much who gets the last kick of the game will win, and it happened to be Brisbane, but they easily could have won that game. They're going to add Taranto and Hopper by the looks of it somehow. I don't know how you can get 2 players from the same club. They're going to have to get creative in the back room. We've seen some youth injected into this Richmond side after the years of success. Guys like Tyler Sonsi, Josh Gibcus, Morris Rioli, really found his feet at the AFL level this year. Noah Cumberland came out of nowhere. Shai Bolton having an All-Australian year, putting himself on the map as one of the best players in the competition in terms of impact when he's on the ball. So I think after the drop last year, to come back into the A, I reckon you're pretty content as a Tigers fan. I wouldn't say it was bloody good because you didn't win a final, but I reckon there's a lot of positives to build on and that you're content. C+. I'm going to give St Kilda a D. It just was disappointing, wasn't it? They looked like a top 4 lock halfway through the season, and then after the bye, I don't know what happened, but they absolutely stunk up the second half of the season. Top that off with Max King, their key forward, not knowing how to kick a set shot most weeks, which cost them a lot of games, and St Kilda fans' sanity. It just wasn't a good season for St Kilda when you consider that they were in the top 4 at one point, absolutely belting sides, playing some really good footy. I'll actually give them a D+ because there is positives because they did play some really good footy this year. I don't think you can be content from being in the top 8 for a lot of the first half of the season and then drop out though. So I think it'd be a bit stiff to give them a C. I reckon a D+ is just about right. Sydney, I'm going to give an A-. Sydney season was great. They play a very exciting brand of footy, a very high pressure brand, quick ball movement through the corridor. I'm going to give them a minus though because they got absolutely belted in the grand final. I feel like it just puts a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth. Obviously, Sydney's season for pretty much up until the last game of the year, literally the grand final, was great. You were like, this is sick. But then to get belted like that in the grand final just turns that A to an A- for me. Sydney are going to be in contention for the next few years. They had some great players rise through the woodworks this year. Paddy McCartan coming back to the AFL level was one of the best stories of the year. Chad Warner's rise to stardom. Errol Goulden is an established player just about, even though he's still so young. His impact on games is massive, and we saw some good footy from guys like Logan McDonald as well. So the youth is coming through, but he's going to go around one more time. It was an awesome year for the Swans, but just a bit of a negative on that last game of the season. But overall, it was absolutely outstanding. For West Coast, I'm going to give them an F because the first half of the year, really, they were non-competitive, playing awful football, getting belted every week. They had one good win against Collingwood, but other than that, it was just absolutely... They sort of pulled it back towards the end of the year. They'd start to compete, and they sort of found their feet a little bit, although they were still losing. But they finished second last on the ladder. They're entering a rebuild now. But the rebuild begins. The 2022 season was a failure for West Coast. For the Western Bulldogs, I'm going to give them a D+. Obviously, they were in the grand final last year. Ended up getting eliminated by the Freo Dockers this year in the first round of finals. So, I mean, it's very disappointing. The Bev Show wasn't happy. I don't think most Bulldogs fans would have been happy with the season that they coughed up. Defensively, weak all year. I think their game plan was very one-dimensional. They like to use the handball chains off half-back through most of the same guys, Bailey Smith and Ed Richards and whatnot, but if they turned the ball over in the middle of the park, they were very vulnerable down back. The positive is they've got plenty of young talent coming through. Guys like Sam Darcy coming in late in the season and showing a lot of potential. Bailey Smith, honestly one of the best players in the AFL in my opinion. Jamara showing glimpses, etc., etc. Overall, it was disappointing, but it wouldn't surprise me to see the Bulldogs bounce back next year. And that's going to wrap up the video. Drop down below your grades on every team and let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Plonker Army, do your thing down there, and we will see you in the next video. Take care, you plonkers.